welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on our authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Hello, my name is Jim TENEYCK. I am the author of The Life and Times of Walter Reuther, An Unfinished Liberal Legacy. And I've been discussing, well, before I start, I just want to thank Reader's Magnet for putting up the excerpts from the book that I mentioned yesterday. There's a new one up today, so I have two excerpts from the book on my my book page site, and also I've added some additional poems to the ones that were printed there yesterday. So I invite fairgoers, people in this audience, to visit that booth at the end of this hour or at your own convenience, and you can get an example of the writing. My writing style, and of my poetry, which is what basically I'm doing now, since publishing this book. Yesterday we looked at the sections of the book that dealt mostly with the biographical information of Reuther, starting from his childhood in Wheeling, West Virginia, to his arrival in Detroit, to his getting his job at Ford, and then his and his early education. At some point, he was involved in the socialist politics. He was campaigning for the socialist candidate Norman Thomas, and he ran into disfavor, let's say, of his of the upper upset Detroit. During the Depression, he was fired, and went on a tour of Europe at the time of his consolidation of power. He arrived just after the Reichstag fire, went to view the Reichstag building, and had many adventures in Germany that we talked about yesterday. Toured the rest of the Europe while he was waiting for the visas to get into the Soviet Union, where he worked for a year at the auto works in Gorky. That Ford was transferring some of its old technology, a Model A model that it was no longer supporting, let's say, or no longer producing domestically. They helped construct the building in Gorky, where a knockoff on this Ford model would be produced. So he and a number of other foreign workers, were working in Gorky. He he toured. He was because he was deemed an outstanding worker. He had the privilege of being able to tour inside of Russia, particularly before they left. They did a tour of the Caucasus, a bit of a walking tour, and going into what are now the former Soviet republics of Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, etc., up to Samarkand. Where beyond Samarkand, it was not, the government wasn't strictly in control yet. They returned, then left Russia via the Trans-Siberian Railroad, had some experiences in China, went to Japan, and found, I got back to the United States by working on a freighter. So we've talked about that yesterday. We talked about his rise within the union, and we talked about the various when he became the head of the General Motors division and eventually the head of the union itself. The strikes that we labeled the Treaty of Detroit. The Treaty of Detroit was the title the press gave to one of the strikes in particular, but really, or one of the negotiations, let's say, in particular, that wasn't a strike, and really was a continuation in successive negotiations of what the terms of that particular bargaining agreement left. So we trace Reuther's formative years, his early experiences out, in Europe, in Russia, and then in his growth, let's say, an ascendancy to the presidency of the Auto Workers Union, and the negotiations that he conducted when he was the president. Today, I want to look at some of the next chapters. I'm going to go with the Cold War to start. Reuther, we're now in many of these chapters, Reuther appears in and out. He's not necessarily the central figure. The book is The Life and Times of Walter Reuther. So a lot of this is about the times and things that were going on at the same time that Reuther was prominent in American life. So the Cold War, the earliest stages of the Cold War were let's say I start discussing the Cold War. Immediately after World War II, Russia was our ally. The Soviet Union was our ally, and there was hope, particularly on the left, that this could lead to some kind of a stabilization of the world order, and that there was no there was a bit of a reluctance to follow Churchill's lead in talking about an Iron Curtain falling from Trieste in the Adriatic to or forget where it was in the Baltic, and I see a question on the monitor. And to follow that lead, Churchill was roundly criticized by many people for that particular speech. It was a little premature. The first part of the chapter on the Cold War, I discussed the role of George Kennan, who was a deputy assistant and to the ambassador, I believe, at the time in the Soviet Union. And when some people in Washington wanted to know what was the situation in the Soviet Union, he was the one that was there. And there was the long telegram, and then later a paper published in Foreign Affairs that was whose author was X, but everybody knew who X was. X was Keenan. So Keenan was the architect of containment. Before I finish with that, let me see here. What was the key challenge you faced while writing this particular chapter? Well, actually, some of the sources I had in writing this particular chapter were from government documents reporting. We will talk about the, the counter revolution and so forth in Iran. We'll talk about events in Guatemala and in Central America and et cetera. So a lot of the research was directly from released government documents, particularly on Iran and on Guatemala. The challenges at this, well, some of on the earlier chapters, back in the 30s and so forth, I wasn't around. I had no personal experience, with the events of this particular time. By the 50s, I was becoming aware of what was going on. I was aware of the atmosphere in the United States. We'll be talking about McCarthy and HUAC a little bit later. I had, some firsthand, information as much as a teenager going on to, toward finishing high school, let's say, at this particular stage would have. But I think I was somewhat alert at this time. So, when reading material from this era sort of converged, let's say, with the impressions that I had at the time, or reinforced perhaps some of the impressions that I had at the time. So that was the particular challenge. So we talk about containment. One of the things that Keenan said that if communism were contained, if the Soviet communism anyway were contained, that it would sort of die of its own accord. That if it could not expand its boundaries and could not extend itself into other areas of the world, then it would just sort of fester on the vine and die, which was sort of a premonition of basically what happened in at the end. Another well, we'll come to that then. Keenan was the father or the architect, let's say, of the policy of containment. Some of the implements in this were the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was actually offered to the Soviet Union as well, but they declined, as did the Soviet-dominated states of Eastern Europe. Czechoslovakia showed some interest, in participating in the Marshall Plan, but that was thwarted. The Russians had their own, let's try to have their own plan for the neighbors that they had dominated. But so the Marshall Plan was used to help save Western Europe and particularly of concern were areas like Greece and to a lesser extent Turkey, where the political situation in those countries was very unstable, more unstable than it was in some of the Western countries like France, which was not too stable, or Italy, which was not too stable um, uh, at this time either. Another question that's asked is what what's your ideal form of government if you're given the chance to choose? Well, I guess Churchill put it best. Democracy, is maybe the worst form of government, except for all of the others. A pluralistic democracy would be ideal. The problem is that, okay, you can create this ideal government, and then you have to keep it. Democracy throughout history has not always been that stable. We've seen democracies come and go, both in the ancient world and in the period in the run up to World War II. A lot of the Germany, France, etc., had democratic governments that, in Germany in particular, did not survive the conditions brought upon by the terms of the Versailles Treaty and the Depression. That really took the underpinnings out of the opposition to Hitler and helped propel him into power. In Italy, Mussolini and his thugs were able to just storm the parliament and take over. So democracy, I call it like an old friend. But if you don't keep in touch and you don't keep in contact and try to exchange information and maintain that friendship, you can lose it. So that's my ideal form of government. Obviously, is democracy. I mentioned, that a number of these people, particularly in the beginning, the 1930s, or in the period before, were socialists, communists, etc. A lot of this was for a lot of people, like Ruther, for instance. This was sort of a passage, a youthful passage into an adulthood. Ruther dropped his membership in the Socialist Party in 1940, I believe, or 38, 40, I'm not sure, to support the election or the re-election of Governor Murphy. He became a Democrat. He became an anti-communist, partly because of belief and partly because the communists were aligned with the factions in the UAW that were opposed to him. So he claims about purging the union of communists. A lot of the best workers, the best recruiters and so forth in the union in the early days were the communists. And a lot of them were tied to efforts, for Ruther, and particularly in building up what was called the West Side Union. It was Ruther had came out of the organizing meeting of the UAW in 1936, where it broke away from the CIO and elected its own president. And reorganized itself. And then there were the factions within that body. But Ruther, at the end of the 36 meeting, his name became prominent. He was given a seat on the executive board, but with no power. With maybe a territory, but he had no money. He was not given the money. He was not given any headquarters or anything of that sort. He had to go and build it. And within 1 year, he did. Basically amalgamating whatever local unions were in that territory into one larger amalgamated union, and then the strike at Kelsey Hayes that we've talked about earlier. People that hated him were, well, at Kelsey Hayes, a number of them were his friends and contacts that he met at the Brookwood Labor College in Katona, where he went briefly upon return from Russia. A lot of the other people that were instrumental in him helping to recruit, particularly people of Polish descent that were able to have a better contact with people of Poles, let's say, than he might have had, were instrumental, in recruiting people of like heritage. A number of them were communists. He broke with them as he advanced through the Union. So we look at a number of the early civil rights activists, particularly those within the Union, that went from communism to anti-communism, etc. One example, one example in particular, was not a friend of Reuther's. I got the. Thanks a lot. Okay, hopefully the answering machine takes that, and I'll try not to let it disturb us as much as the dangers of doing this from your home, that somebody actually might call at this time. Okay, hopefully they're not leaving a message. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah, I got distracted. We're sort of going backwards instead of back into the chapter in the Cold War, and I got so distracted that I forgot exactly where I was leading. I was talking. I know the one example. One guy was, the head of the American Communist Party back in the 1920s. A guy by the name of J. Lovestone, who shows up from time to time in this narrative, not necessarily in a good way. So he goes to Moscow. He was backing Bukharin or Kamenev, or one of the rivals of Stalin in the succession after Lenin's death. He goes to Russia for a meeting of the various communist parties, and he's denounced, from the podium as a capitalist roader, et cetera, et cetera. And so he's basically thrown out of the party. He comes back and starts another party which has communist in its name. It's sort of the alternative communist party or whatever. Within a year, it drops communism from the name. He gets he finds some attachments into the labor movement, and eventually he ends up as a colleague of George Meany, as one of the more conservative advisors, let's say, to Meany, in the 50s and into the 60s. There are a lot of examples of people that have gone through this kind of progression. A lot of the names, not all of them, but a lot of the names that McCarthy was dredging up in the 50s were people that had been attracted to communism as in their youth, and probably were no longer any active members of the Communist Party at all. But are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? And you could, if we were under oath, you wouldn't be able to deny it, and if you admit it, then you were to rat out anybody else that might have been, a party member or had some communist leanings during your time. So there was a lot of that went on in the 50s. It was a way of attacking the left as much as it was trying to root out active Communist Party members who may, who, even if they were not necessarily agents of the Soviet government. So I don't know. That's a roundabout answer to a question which I think was, what form of government are you are you favor with? Basically the one we have, if we can keep it, like Franklin said. And that's a good question right now. Now back to the Cold War. So we had George Kennan, devising the concept of containment. He was always a deputy of this or a deputy of that, because he had a pretty abrasive personality and didn't do well as the actual officer, other than the deputy. So he was the father of containment, but he had a lot of criticisms about how it was being carried out. So some of the early efforts were to shore up democracy in Western Europe, particularly in France, and for the Marshall Plan, particularly in Greece and Turkey, southern Italy, and Germany was our enemy. How do you how what is going to be the action toward Germany? So there was uh, one piece of advice that had a lot of adherence, was to strangle Germany by taking away their heavy industry. Uh, Ruther was one of the people that argued strongly against this. The main person that argued strongly against this was Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover and people like Ruther, etc., said that the German industry was essential for the strength of Western Europe. They were the industrial center, particularly the Ruhr Valley, etc. The One of the things that happened in Western Germany during the early post-war period was something called codeterminism. Um, the American occupation forces, wanted to quickly stabilize Germany and to keep to protect it, let's say, from encroachment by its eastern neighbors, and particularly by Russia. So they were looking for people to fill the various positions, particularly in the industries and so forth. And a lot of them were the people that had collaborated with the Nazis, during the war. So there was strong opposition within that by some of the labor union leaders. One in particular, when the American general, told him that this person was going to be put in charge of the particular manufacturing facilities, said no, and the general threatened him with conviction, putting him in jail. And he said, pulls out his hands, put on the handcuffs. I've seen what Hitler's jails were like, and survived that. I think I can survive your jails as well. So, there were, there's strong opposition, let's say, within particularly the unions in Germany against, reinstating some of these former people that had collaborated with the Nazis. One in the steel industry in particular, what came out of this was something called codeterminism. It has a German name, but I'm forgetting what it is. Codeterminism. In its strongest form, the companies would have half the people on the executive board of the companies would be representatives from the management. Half the people would be representatives from the workers. And if there was a disagreement where neither you could agree, if it was split between evenly between those, then the management had the last vote. So what that wasn't necessarily as strong as it was in some of the other German unions, but that's still to the point today. In fact, that was part of the focus of the Volkswagen strike in Chattanooga, back 4 or 5 years ago, where the union or the company was not against, in fact, favored having representation from the UAW, and that they were used to working with the union to smooth out labor problems and so forth within the plant. It was the politicians, in Chattanooga that strongly opposed that and encouraged a no vote among the workers, in the area. It was not the company that was the company was actually supporting the unionization. So one of the aspects of codeterminism is that it's not necessarily going to be an even split, or the union has that much of a say in the manufacturing policies of the plant. But the union does have a voice and at least a seat at the table, and knows where the company is going, and what educational efforts and so forth are going to be needed to bring the workers up to the levels that they're going to need to be able to function, under whatever changes are going to be needed, to implement management policy. So it's work, like an internship policy almost, in order to keep supporting the workers that are there, to enable them to take on the new roles as the technology changes. But Germany, was a thought, was a fear. What's going to happen with Germany? Should there be retribution, and just prevent them from going to war for a third time by taking away their industrial capacity? That's what happened in the East. The Russians did remove, a lot of the German manufacturing plants and so forth from Germany, and brought it into Russia. The situation in France. This will come into play when we talk about the Vietnam War. But in France, there are people that once France was liberated, the people in the resistance were the people that were there on the ground, that were in the position to take over. The typical politician class, the previous ruling class, were not the people that were the partisans, let's say, in the resistance. The resistance members were largely socialist communists, the people that had the most to fear from the German invasion, and were most prominent in the resistant movement. So when France was liberated, these were the people that were there to assume a role in the government. The usual politicians came back a year or two later, but France was as unstable, let's say, as far as the communist influence within France as some of the countries in Central America, like Guatemala, at the time. You had a strong, in Guatemala, you had, a strong history of the military and the industrial, or not so much the industrial, but the plantation owners, etc., that, dominated, life, politics, etc., in those countries. And then the more democratic movements that took place in Guatemala and Costa Rica at that particular time. During the war, Victor Reuther, in particular, who was more fluent in his German than his brother, and picked up more Russian when they were working in Gorky than Walter did, was was broadcasting for the OSS, or it wasn't the Voice of America. I don't think it was called that at the time, but essentially the Voice of America. Talking to the German workers. This is what's on the way. What life is going to be like after after the fall of Hitler. So he had a lot of contacts. He had a lot of contacts with people in Germany. That were part of his network. So he was somebody that had an influence, let's say, in the immediate post-war Germany. Okay, so from the Marshall Plan, the next step in containment was to build a belt around the underbelly of the bear, so to speak. And we have these alliances. There's NATO in Europe, to the east of the Soviet bloc, and then underneath it you start having these other alliances like CETO, and there was one that was I forget the name of it now. The one that contained initially Britain was a member. The United States was actually not a member officially, but it was an interested party. There was Jordan. The Iraq at the time was ruled also by a king from the Hashemite family, or the Hashemite dynasty, for a few years. There was Iran, which became a focal point, in the middle of this belt, and then there was India, and then on to the west of that, you had the CETO nations, and so you were forming this ring of containment around the southern border of Russia. The key elements that were missing were initially Iran and India. So I'll skip over for the moment, Central America, and just look at Iran. So the chapter, the section within the chapter dealing with Iran talks about the different parties that were in play within the country. The outside countries that were most prominently involved in Iran, and the ouster of the Shah initially, and then the reinstatement of the Shah, and what that meant in terms of an American involvement afterward. So when Roosevelt went to Iran for the Tehran conference, during the war, he stayed at the Russian embassy. He stayed at the Russian embassy. The American embassy was, rather small, and we did not have much of a contact in Iran. And one of the reasons he would stay at the Russian embassy is because of his polio, of his being bound really to a wheelchair. The conference, the Russian embassy, could be a setting for the conference delegates to meet. It was a splendid grounds that had swans and gazelles on it, and it occupied a fairly large expanse of central Tehran. Roosevelt wasn't able to go off and greet the Shah at this point either. He was he was living within, or staying within, the Russian embassy. So to protect his view, let's say, of not being bound to the wheelchair, and to project his to let's say not deflect from the image that he was projecting at home or on the world stage. So the American presence was fairly light. the two main foreign presence were the Russians and the Brits. The English had the oil. They had the rights to. It was the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. The British had get much of their oil from Iran at this stage. The oil fields in Saudi Arabia, I don't think had been fully developed or developed much at all at this point in the 30s. So, Iran was a major supplier of oil to the West, particularly to Britain. So the British interest was in the oil. The Russians, they had, there was parts of the Russian territory, like Azerbaijan, which was one of the Soviets at the time. But there was an Azerbaijani region within Iran itself too. What the Russians had was they were going to they had a force. Well, I guess it was mostly Iranian, privates and so forth. But it was like a police force that policed some of the other provinces of Iran that were not, not so much of Iranian or Persian descent, but of other nationality groupings that were at one point part of the Persian Empire. So, the Russians had a police presence in Iran. They wanted to get more of a presence. They wanted the oil or wanted a share of the oil as well. Um, the, the Iranian government was there was the Shah and the royalist members of the parliament, that were loyal to the Shah. But the bigger box were the nationalists, whose leader was a man by the name of Mohammad Mossadegh, and the Tudeh party, which was the Communist Party. So those were the three main elements of the, in the government. The Brits and Americans were fearful of the role of the Tudehists, within the government. One of the previous prime ministers was able to bamboozle the Russians, into agreeing to relinquish their role, their military or their policing role in parts of Iran, in the Azerbaijani section in particular, uh, with sort of the promise that they were going to open up the oil options that the Tudeh party was legal and was going to be a fairly prominent member that would see that the Russians did get some of the oil leases that they were looking for. Turned out that they got nothing. They got the Russians out of the country, and there was a new election that turned in a different parliament, the Majlis, and the Russians ended up with nothing out of that. Um, the nationalists under Mossadegh wanted to nationalize the oil fields, and when Mossadegh, became the prime minister, they did. And Mossadegh, as I say in the book, he was a frail old man, uh, but he was a magnetic speaker who would work himself up into a froth and collapse sometimes during his talk. He'd get into a coughing spell and so forth, usually talking about all of the sorrows and so forth that were inflicted upon the Iranian people. Um, I think one of the things that I'll be putting on for excerpts from the text would be my interpretation of this is that the Shiite religion is one of suffering. That the split between the Sunni and the Shiite branches of Islam occurred when one of the son-in-law of the Prophet Ali and his son Hussein were murdered, and lost. There was a fight of who was going to be the the spokesperson for Islam in the wake after the Prophet himself had died. So Ali and Hussein were murdered, and that was the focus of a lot of the Shiite rituals, the sorrow over the deaths of Ali and Hussein. You have the situation where you see on television sometimes where during Shura they are flagellating. People go around flagellating themselves for whatever part of guilt that they bear in the murder of these two leaders. So Mossadegh played upon that. He played upon the Iranian sensibility. I describe it in the book as, the Shiite religion is something akin to having a Good Friday without having a redemptive Easter Sunday to follow it. The religion, adherents of the religion are still in mourning for the death of Hussein. And so Mossadegh played on that. He was an effective parliamentarian. However, he was not necessarily an effective administrator. And taking over the Iranian oil company, the Anglo-Iranian oil company from the British and nationalizing it led to fights about how much Britain should be compensated for their loss. And also it led to a condition that the Iranians weren't yet ready to manage the oil fields all on their own, and the Brits were able to summon up enough of the world nations, let's say, that were potential buyers for Iranian oil that refused to buy it. So there was a bit of a boycott against Iranian oil. The Iranians weren't really ready to take over the field, and the economy suffered. During the period, of this period, when Mossadegh took over, the British intelligence and the CIA were working to forestall, let's say, the rise of Mossadegh. And when the Shah was forced out of the country and into exile, they were planning a coup. So the CIA leader in Iran at the time was the grandson of Teddy Roosevelt, Kermit Roosevelt. He was the man organizing the coup. He had claques that would appear, appear, that would maybe cause trouble, that they could blame on the two deists. He had each of the sides had their, the Brits had their journalists and, people that they could send their propaganda to and promote whatever they want to. We had, the same people working within, particularly the journalists and people of influence within the country that could promote some of what we were trying to send. And, that was part of the counter coup. And there were officers within the military that wanted to get rid of Mossadegh. So a coup was planned. The Shah was to play a part in it. There's a nice little intriguing story of how this was going to work, what part he was to play, what part his twin sister was had to play, in trying to involve him. To put it succinctly, the forces loyal to Mossadegh found out about it, thwarted the coup. The coup failed, and Mossadegh remained in power. However, he was beginning to lose public favor because of the hardships, the economic effects of his nationalization of the oil fields. The counter coup was somewhat serendipitous and somewhat spontaneous. Actually, because Mossadegh was losing favor, some of the claques that Roosevelt had organized just appeared in the streets more or less spontaneously, to the surprise, really, of Roosevelt. And once there was some public outcry against Mossadegh, the coup plotters, appeared in the streets with their tanks, and ended up with a counter coup that ousted Mossadegh, restored the Shah, who had fled to Italy by this time, and brought him back to his peacock throne. He was very grateful to his army, his etc., to God, his army, etc., and to you, to Kermit Roosevelt. Uh, um, the effect of this coup long term was that the higher clergy could not be touched. There was no the government could not act against the clergy. The clergy weren't particularly politically involved, at this stage, but particularly Khomeini, was rising to the rank of Grand Ayatollah, which would have made him, totally untouchable within the country itself, before he got, to this rank, of which there are never more than five, apparently, in all of the Shiite world at any one time. So, it was a position from which he would have been unassailable. So he was ushered to the Iraqi border and pushed across and ended up in France, where he conducted much of his correspondence with his followers back in Iran. Um, the people that were anti-Shah at the time were the nationalists under Mossadegh and the Tudeists, the communists. So these were mostly the intellectuals within Iran, a lot of the more prominent politicians, and these were purged. They were driven from the country, some executed, some ending up in jail. Uh, the Shah instituted Savak, the secret police, and he had weekly conversations with the CIA agent in Tehran. So a lot of the structure that was built around the Shah came out of the CIA, out of the contacts. So the involvement of the CIA was much stronger, actually, after the counter coup than it was in precipitating it. So that's the situation, that persisted up until the next stage of the Iranian Revolution. So Iran was put back as part of the belt, and that left India as the belt buckle, that was an unaligned country. Okay, so before we go to India, let's take a quick look at the question that is here. Nonfiction books are very interesting to read. Can you share also to us your sources? Yes, I can source. I had a lot of different sources. Like I said, for information about Guatemala and Iran, a lot of it came from the CIA records, which were also published pretty much the same thing within the New York Times. There was a book on Iran by an Egyptian author that was, quite informative. That I don't remember the title. I have all the references listed in the back. Uh, this is about the life and history of Walter Reuther. For the biographical information, I tried to stay away from the main biographies of Reuther. There was one by what's his name? It was called "The Most Dangerous Man in Detroit." There was a quote from George Romney had made about Reuther. And that's probably as far as a straight biography of Ruther, that's probably the main one. There's the Brothers Ruther by Victor, who wrote a book about their activities and so forth, growing up and so forth. His daughter, Lisa, Lisa Ruther Dickmeyer wrote a book about her father. So those are three of the main sources about Ruther, but there are other smaller sources, that I tried to use, particularly not going to the main biographies because I just didn't want to, be tempted either consciously or mostly subconsciously of parroting what's already there. So there are a number of books. I mentioned the books about Governor Murphy, and the important part that he played throughout that period. As mayor of Detroit, he founded the National Council of Mayors, served as their first president. He was the trial judge in the Ossian Sweet murder trial, which we'll get to in talking about civil rights. He was the governor of Michigan during the strike at Flint. He became the Attorney General of the United States and instituted the Civil Rights Division within the Justice Department, and then he was appointed to the Supreme Court. That was his final position. He also, at some stage, served as the Governor General of the Philippines. So he had a large career, and he served distinguished. His service distinguished himself in most of these positions that he held. On the Supreme Court, mentioned the other day, he was one of two justices that voted against the confinement of the Japanese during World War II. They're the Fowners. Eric and Philip Fowner wrote a number of labor history books. There's Boyle, a man by the name of Boyle, wrote a book that served as source material. Books on Ford, etc. So, given the ambition, let's say, of this book, to be about the life and times, then there were a lot of other books other than the ones pertaining directly to Ruther that was used. But the CIA records on Guatemala and on Iran, were the primary sources for much of this material. And then there was a book, I forget the man's name or even what the title was, but he was an Egyptian journalist that wrote about the Iranian Revolution with some authority. There was a book by Bonnie Sauter, who was one of the first Khomeini, era prime ministers who was not, who ran into disfavor. He had to flee to France, and I think he was actually murdered at some point in France. But but that was sort of that's not something that would be in this book because that deals with the later history of Iran. Another question is how are you doing? How old were you during the civil rights movement? I was, in 63, I was in college. I grew up in a basically a Republican town. My parents were Republican. I went around the town in the 50s in the 52, I guess it would have been, with an I Like Ike button, big I Like Ike buttons and so forth. It was, the town was generally Republican. And, I, I had, from my experiences, if we had the 18-year-old vote when I turned 18, I probably would have regrettably at that time voted for Nixon at times. So the civil rights movement was instrumental. Reuther became a hero to me during the March on Washington, leading up to the civil rights movement for his activities within the labor unions. I mentioned that I worked in a Johns Manville, plant where they produced asbestos shingles and asbestos sideboards in the particular building I worked. So, I would come home. You could blow off the asbestos from your clothes and so forth. I was a mixer man at sort of various states jobs within the line, but a lot of the time I was the mixer man. So you get 2 bags, 50-pound bags of asbestos. You get some bags of silex or some compound, some cementing compound that you mix with it. You pull down a lever that pours some scrap, ground up scrap into the mixture. You wait until the little lever gets to a certain stage where it's at the red line. You pull the trigger, pull the lever, send this off into the rest of the machine where it comes out at the other end. You're taking off either the shingles or the asbestos boarding and so forth. So I saw the working conditions in that plant. I sympathized with strongly with the people that were working there. I thought one of the things that got to me a little bit was that I was making the same amount of money as they were. Within the plant, I guess there were certain jobs that had a better premium than other jobs, and the older time workers, would have a shot at them. But for people, working on the plant, we all had the same basic rate, whether we were just kids working there for the summer to pay our way through college, or if they were people that had been working there for 20 years. The company knew the danger of asbestos. Also, there were always people going around with different measuring devices and so forth, to measure that. So that's where I began. I was strongly in favor of the civil rights movement. I was in graduate school at the time of also of the later stages of the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War protests. So I was involved with a lot of that. And there goes my phone again. Shut up. What what was the message that this chapter needs to send to the readers? Okay, well, this chapter evolves from the early stages of the Cold War, the events in the Cold War, from the events in Guatemala and in Iran, and then it goes the passage to India. At one stage during one of the labor movements, and I see I'm exceeding my time. I'll try to answer this question, very succinctly and take us through the rest of the chapter, which I won't have time to go into. The kind of lecturing detail that I guess I sink back into all too easily. The chapter proceeds. The next is the passage to India, where Meany at in one of the either in a newspaper article or in a board meeting claims that in the Cold War you can't be a neutral, and Nehru and Tito, who were two of the leaders of what they called at the time the neutral bloc, can't sit on the fence. They're either with us or against us, basically. And it was a very and Meany intimated very strongly that they were against us. That they're not really neutral. So that created a bit of an outcry in India, and so that the U.S. excuse me, the United States was looking for some diplomatic emissary to go to India to to sort of smooth out the feathers. The two people, short of Eisenhower himself, that the Indians recommended that they would like were Earl Warren, the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice at the time, and or Walter Reuther. So Reuther went. He spent 3 weeks in India. He met with Nehru. He met with different organizations. He saw the complexities of India, the numerous different language groups that were there, etc. He favorably impressed Nehru, and he was an emissary, let's say, of the United States to India to smooth over the feathers. I go then from this to there were the labor hearings. Well, there were the hearings, the labor racketeering hearings. The McClellan committee. The first the thing that brought a lot of notice to the McClellan hearings were the Teamsters. The Teamsters, the corruption in the Teamsters was profound and was fully exposed in the case particularly of Dave Beck, who was the president of the Teamsters at the time. And then there was his underling, his rival, let's say, the guy that really wanted his job was Jimmy Hoffa. So Dave Beck did not survive the McClellan hearings. Hoffa was basically wounded by the McClellan hearings, but he did not lose his position within the organization. The Teamsters were kicked out of the AFL-CIO and became a pariah, within the labor movement for a number of years. The next choice was go after the UAW, go after Reuther. And so they did. And the McClellan committee had Republicans were on the committee were Goldwater, a guy by the name of Munt, M-U-N-D-T, from South Dakota, and Curtis, who was from one of the agricultural states in the Midwest as well. And then another member that was initially on the committee was Joe McCarthy, and but he had run into his he was about to be or had been censored by the Senate. He had his drinking problems, and he was not a figure of import. So they tried to go after Reuther. The book details, to what extent, how Reuther defended himself, how Reuther defended the UAW, how the Republican committee members attacked him, and that they didn't really touch him at all. Then I talk about his meetings with Mikoyan and Khrushchev. He met with Mikoyan, who was coming a bit earlier, I guess, setting up the stage for the visit by Khrushchev at the end of toward the end of the Eisenhower years, and Mikoyan was meeting with business leaders and so forth. Mikoyan was the #2 guy in the Soviet Union at this time. And he'd been somebody, he was always not necessarily #2, but he was the agent, in the Stalin era that negotiated the technology transfer from Ford into Gorky. He was someone that was always prominent, within the hierarchy. He was the #2 person at this point in the in the era of Khrushchev, and then after Khrushchev, he remained, as one of the chief leaders under Brezhnev until, I guess, his own death. So Mikoyan was, somebody that was that met with not only the business leaders but with labor. Much to this, Meade was, treated like communism was a communicable disease. That if you met with them, you were likely to catch it or something. So he would have nothing to do with with meeting any of the communist officials. Whereas Reuther and the head of the Electrical Workers Union. There were a number of other union leaders that did. And they met with Khrushchev in San Francisco. The book goes into detail about describing, that particular meeting and, how it transpired. And from there, we go into, the thing I was going to talk about today, but I always talk too much and overstay my time, which would be Vietnam. So I will be back again tomorrow. I think tomorrow's Thursday, so I'm back again tomorrow at 6 o'clock, I believe. And I urge you to, if you're interested, I have a couple of excerpts from the book to give a style of my writing style and, etc. And I also have, that my writing today or these days consists of writing poetry. And so there's a selection of my poems that are there as well. So thank you. Hope to see many of you again tomorrow at 6. Thank you for your questions.